You have been waiting your entire life for someone to give you permission to choose yourself, to put your peace first, to say no without explanation, to walk away from situations that drain you, to stop performing for people who will never be satisfied. You have been waiting for permission that will never come, because the people who benefit from your self-sacrifice will never tell you it's okay to stop sacrificing. The systems that profit from your compliance will never encourage your rebellion. The relationships built on your diminishment will never celebrate your expansion. And so you wait. You wait while your body keeps score of every boundary you didn't set. You wait while resentment builds in places you didn't know could hold such bitterness. You wait while your dreams collect dust in the corner of your mind, labeled selfish, labeled unrealistic, labeled too much. You wait while everyone around you seems to know exactly what you should do with your life, your time, your energy, your one precious existence. Everyone has an opinion about how you should live. Everyone except you. Let me tell you what no one else will tell you. You don't need permission. You never did. The permission you've been seeking doesn't exist outside of you. It can't be granted by your mother, your partner, your boss, your friends, or the invisible jury of strangers whose judgment you carry in your chest like stones. The only permission that matters is the permission you give yourself, and that permission is available right now, in this moment, before you finish listening to these words. But here's the problem. Even when you hear this truth, something inside you resists it, because choosing yourself feels dangerous. It feels selfish. It feels like betrayal. You have been so thoroughly conditioned to believe that your worth comes from how much you give, how much you tolerate, how much you shrink to make others comfortable, that the idea of prioritizing your own peace feels like a moral failing. You have been taught that good people sacrifice, that loving people put others first, that strong people don't need rest, that successful people don't have boundaries. These are lies, beautiful, convincing, socially acceptable lies that keep you trapped in a life you didn't choose. Right now, as you listen to this, your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe your shoulders are tight. Maybe your jaw is clenched. Maybe there's a knot in your stomach that you've become so used to, you barely notice it anymore. Maybe you're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Your body has been screaming at you for years that something is wrong, that you're giving too much, that you're tolerating too much, that you're disappearing. And you know this. Deep down, beneath all the rationalizations and obligations and good reasons why you can't change anything right now, you know that you have abandoned yourself. You have made yourself small to make others big. You have silenced your needs to amplify theirs. You have twisted yourself into shapes that don't fit your soul just to avoid disappointing people who will be disappointed anyway. Think about the last time you said yes, when everything inside you was screaming no. Think about the last time you stayed silent when you wanted to speak. Think about the last time you tolerated disrespect because confrontation felt impossible. Think about the last time you checked your phone obsessively, seeking validation from people whose opinions shouldn't matter. Think about the last time you felt physically drained after a social interaction, as if someone had pulled a plug and let all your energy drain away. This is what self-abandonment feels like. This is what happens when you spend years, decades, a lifetime choosing everyone else over yourself. You become a stranger in your own life. You lose the ability to recognize your own desires, because you've spent so long performing other people's expectations. You develop anxiety that has no clear source because the source is everywhere, in every relationship where you can't be honest, in every situation where you can't be yourself, in every moment where you choose peace for others over peace for yourself. The rage comes later. Maybe it's already here. The rage that builds when you realize how much time you've lost, how many opportunities you've let pass because you were too busy being what other people needed, how many versions of yourself you've killed to keep other people comfortable, how many dreams you've abandoned because someone told you they were impractical, unrealistic, too much, too little, too late. You are angry. You should be angry. Anger is information. Anger is your soul's way of telling you that something is fundamentally wrong, that you have been living a life designed by committee, approved by consensus, built on everyone's needs except your own. The anger is not the problem. The problem is what you've been doing with it. Turning it inward. Calling it depression? Medicating it? Minimizing it? Apologizing for it? But what if the anger is actually clarity? What if it's the first honest thing you've felt in years? What if it's not something to suppress, but something to listen to? Because underneath the anger is a truth you've been avoiding. You cannot continue living this way. Your body won't let you. Your mind won't let you. Your soul won't let you. Something has to change. And that something is not everyone else. It's you. This is the moment where most people stop listening. Because change is terrifying, especially when the change required is not in your circumstances, but in your relationship with yourself. Especially when the change means disappointing people you love. Especially when the change means being called selfish by people who benefit from your selflessness. Especially when the change means standing alone in your truth while everyone else tells you you're wrong. But here's what I know, and here's what you're about to discover. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of this fear. A version that wakes up without dread. A version that moves through the day with intention instead of obligation. A version that sleeps deeply because your conscience is clear and your boundaries are intact. A version that no longer seeks permission or validation because your internal authority is absolute. A version that has learned the most important lesson of human existence. You cannot love others well while abandoning yourself. You cannot serve from depletion. You cannot give what you don't have. This is not a journey toward selfishness. This is a journey toward wholeness. This is not about becoming cold or uncaring. This is about becoming honest. This is not about building walls to keep people out. This is about building foundations strong enough to let the right people in. This is about learning the difference between boundaries and barriers, between solitude and isolation, between self-protection and self-imprisonment. By the end of this journey, you will possess something that no one can take from you, an unshakable internal authority, a knowing that runs deeper than anyone else's opinion, a peace that exists regardless of external chaos, a sovereignty over your own life that doesn't require anyone's approval or understanding. You will move from people-pleaser to self-protector, from guilt-ridden to grounded, from scattered to sovereign. You will learn how to feel the pull of obligation without being controlled by it, how to recognize manipulation without becoming cynical, how to love people without losing yourself, how to serve without sacrificing, how to be generous without being depleted, how to be present without being consumed. These are not opposing forces. These are the natural result of choosing yourself first. The transformation begins with a single recognition. You have been lying to yourself about why you can't change. You tell yourself you're trapped by circumstances, by responsibilities, by other people's needs, by financial obligations, by family expectations, by professional demands. But the truth is simpler and harder than that. You are trapped by your own unwillingness to tolerate other people's discomfort with your boundaries. You are trapped by your fear of being seen as selfish. You are trapped by your addiction to being needed. You are trapped by the false belief that your worth comes from how much you give rather than from the fact that you exist. And underneath all of that, you are trapped by guilt. The guilt that was planted in you so early, you think it's part of your personality. The guilt that whispers you're not doing enough, being enough, giving enough. The guilt that makes choosing yourself feel like a crime. This guilt is not yours. It was given to you by people who needed you to stay small, by systems that profit from your compliance, by cultures that reward self-sacrifice. This guilt is a tool of control, and you are going to learn how to put it down. But I'm not going to lie to you. This journey is not easy. Choosing yourself will cost you. It will cost you relationships that only worked because you were willing to betray yourself. It will cost you the approval of people whose love was always conditional. It will cost you the comfort of being liked by everyone. It will cost you the identity you've built around being the helper, the fixer, the one who always says yes. And it will give you everything. It will give you your life back, your energy back, your dreams back, your self-respect back, your peace back. It will give you relationships built on truth instead of performance. It will give you the ability to show up fully because you're no longer running on empty. It will give you a future you actually want instead of one you're enduring. This is your moment. Not someday. Not when things settle down. Not when you've given enough. Not when everyone else is okay. Right now. This moment. The one where you decide that your peace is not negotiable, that your boundaries are not suggestions, that your life is not a democracy where everyone gets a vote except you, the one where you finally give yourself the permission you've been waiting for, the permission to choose yourself, the permission to prioritize your peace over everything, the permission to become who you actually are, instead of who everyone else needs you to be. The journey starts here, with this single choice, to stop abandoning yourself, to stop waiting, to stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life. Are you ready? Because once you start, there is no going back. Once you taste sovereignty, you can never return to servitude. Once you remember who you are, you cannot pretend to forget. The door is open, the permission is granted. Not by me, by you, for you. Walk through it. You know exactly what self-abandonment looks like because you're living it. Right now, today, this morning, when your phone buzzed with a request and you felt your stomach drop before you even read the message. You already knew what it would ask of you. You already knew you didn't want to do it. And you already knew you would say yes anyway. Because saying no feels impossible. Because disappointing people feels like death. Because you have trained everyone in your life to expect your compliance. And now the thought of breaking that pattern fills you with a dread so thick you can taste it. Let's talk about what your life actually looks like. Not the version you present on social media. Not the story you tell at dinner parties. The real version. The one you live inside when no one is watching. You say yes when everything inside you screams no. Your best friend asks you to help her move for the 3rd time this year. You have plans. You're exhausted. You need a day to yourself. But you hear yourself saying, of course, no problem. Happy to help. Your boss asks if you can take on another project. You're already drowning. You're already working late every night. You're already sacrificing your health for a job that would replace you in a week. But you say, sure, I can handle it. Your mother calls and tells you she's planned a family gathering and expects you there. You had other plans. You don't want to go. The last gathering left you depleted for days. But you rearrange everything because the alternative, her disappointment, her guilt trips, her subtle implications that you don't care about family, feels worse than betraying yourself one more time. Every yes is a small death. Every compliance is a piece of you that disappears. And you tell yourself it's not a big deal. It's just one afternoon. It's just one project. It's just one gathering. But it's never just one. It's a pattern, a way of life, a systematic erasure of your own needs, your own desires, your own right to exist on your own terms. You stay silent when you want to speak. Someone makes a comment that bothers you. It's not overtly offensive, but it lands wrong. It dismisses your experience. It minimizes your feelings. It crosses a line you didn't know you had until it was crossed, and you feel the words forming in your throat. The response, the boundary. The simple statement of this doesn't work for me. But you swallow it. You smile. You laugh it off. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive, that it's not worth the conflict, that speaking up would make things awkward. So you carry that unspoken truth in your body, in your jaw, in your shoulders, in the tension that never quite releases. You tolerate disrespect because confrontation feels impossible. Your partner speaks to you in a tone that makes you feel small. Your coworker takes credit for your work. Your family member makes jokes at your expense, and everyone laughs except you. And you know it's wrong. You know you deserve better. But the thought of addressing it directly makes your heart race, makes your palms sweat, makes you rehearse the conversation in your head 1,000 times without ever having it out loud. Because what if they get defensive? What if they turn it around on you? What if they tell you you're overreacting? What if speaking up costs you the relationship? So you stay silent. You absorb it. You normalize it. You convince yourself that this is just how relationships work. You check your phone obsessively for validation. You post something online and then refresh constantly to see how people respond. You send a text and watch for the 3 dots that mean someone is typing back. You measure your worth by likes, by comments, by how quickly people respond, by whether anyone noticed you at all. And when the validation comes, it feels good for exactly 3 seconds before you need another hit. And when it doesn't come, you spiral. You analyze. You wonder what you did wrong. You question everything about yourself based on the digital silence of people who are probably just busy living their own lives. But their attention has become your oxygen, and without it, you can't breathe. You feel physically drained after social interactions, even the good ones, even with people you love. You come home and collapse. You need hours alone to recover. You used to think you were just introverted. But this is something else. This is the exhaustion of performing, of monitoring every word, of reading every facial expression, of adjusting yourself in real time to match the energy in the room, of being so focused on what everyone else needs that you lose track of what you need, of smiling when you don't feel like smiling, of laughing when nothing is funny, of pretending to be fine when you're falling apart. You are not drained because you're introverted. You are drained because you are not being yourself. And pretending takes energy. More energy than you have to give. You lie awake at night, replaying conversations where you didn't defend yourself. Someone said something hours ago, maybe days ago, and you're still thinking about it. Still crafting the perfect response you'll never deliver. Still imagining what you should have said. How you should have stood up for yourself. How different you would feel right now if you had just spoken your truth in that moment, but you didn't. And now it's too late, and the opportunity has passed, and you're left with this low-grade rage that has nowhere to go, so it turns inward, becomes self-criticism, becomes shame, becomes another piece of evidence that you are weak, that you are broken, that you will never be the kind of person who sets boundaries and means them. This is what self-abandonment looks like in practice. These are not random struggles. This is a pattern so familiar you barely notice it anymore. A pattern that has become your identity. You are the person who says yes, the person who doesn't make waves, the person who keeps the peace, the person everyone can count on because you will always sacrifice yourself to make things easier for everyone else. And people love this about you. They tell you how sweet you are, how accommodating, how easy, how low maintenance. And you smile and say, thank you, while something inside you dies a little more. Because here's what they don't see. Here's what you barely let yourself see. This pattern is destroying you. It's destroying your sleep. You lie awake with your mind racing, replaying the day, analyzing every interaction, worrying about what people think, planning tomorrow's performance. Your body is exhausted, but your brain won't shut off because there's always something to process, some social interaction to decode, some boundary you failed to set that you're now trying to rationalize. You wake up tired. You go through the day tired. You go to bed tired. But tired doesn't begin to describe it. You are depleted. You are running on fumes. You are one crisis away from collapse. It's creating chronic anxiety. You feel it in your chest, in your stomach, in the way your thoughts spiral. You're anxious before social events because you don't know what will be expected of you. You're anxious during social events because you're trying to manage everyone's emotions except your own. You're anxious after social events because you're analyzing everything you said and did. You're anxious about emails, text messages, phone calls, confrontations that might happen, confrontations that did happen, the future, the past, everything. The anxiety has no clear source because the source is everywhere. It's in every relationship where you can't be honest. It's in every situation where you sacrifice yourself. It's in every moment where you abandon your truth to keep someone else comfortable. It's ruining your relationships through resentment. You give and give and give and tell yourself you're doing it freely. But you're not. You're doing it with an unspoken expectation that your sacrifice will be noticed, appreciated, reciprocated. And when it's not, you feel bitter. You feel used. You feel invisible. But you can't say this out loud, because that would mean admitting you weren't giving freely in the first place. So the resentment builds. It builds toward your partner who doesn't seem to appreciate everything you do. It builds toward your friends who take more than they give. It builds toward your family who expects your presence at every event but never asks how you're doing. It builds toward yourself for not being strong enough to say no. The resentment is poison, and it's killing the very relationships you're sacrificing yourself to maintain. It's leaving you feeling like a stranger in your own life. You look around and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. When did you become this person? When did you stop having opinions? When did you lose your edge? When did you become so afraid of disappointing people that you're willing to disappoint yourself constantly? You used to have dreams. You used to have boundaries. You used to know what you wanted. Now you're not sure who you are beyond the roles you play for other people. Daughter, sister, friend, partner, employee, caretaker, peacekeeper. You're all of these things. But who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when no one needs anything from you? You don't know anymore. And that terrifies you. The physical manifestations are real. They are not in your head. They are in your body. The knot in your stomach before family gatherings that starts days in advance. The tension headache that won't go away, no matter how much water you drink or how many pills you take. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix because it's not a sleep problem. It's a soul problem. You are tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of shrinking, tired of being who everyone else needs you to be. Your body is keeping score. It remembers every boundary you didn't set. Every time you said yes when you meant no. Every time you smiled through disrespect, or every time you silenced yourself to keep the peace. Your body holds all of it. In your tight shoulders, in your clenched jaw, in your shallow breathing, in your digestive issues, in your immune system that can't seem to fight off anything anymore, in your nervous system that's stuck in constant threat response. Your body is screaming at you, and you keep ignoring it. You keep pushing through. You keep telling yourself you're fine, but you're not fine. And somewhere deep inside, you know this. You know that the way you're living is not sustainable. You know that the pattern has to break. You know that something fundamental has to change. But knowing and doing are different things. And right now, the gap between them feels impossible to cross. Self-abandonment has become your identity. It's not just what you do. It's who you are. You are the accommodating one, the flexible one, the one without needs, the one who makes everything easier for everyone else. And you don't know how to be anyone else. Because being anyone else would require disappointing people, would require setting boundaries, would require choosing yourself. And that feels impossible. It feels selfish. It feels like becoming someone you don't want to be. But here's the truth you need to hear. The person you're afraid of becoming, the one who sets boundaries and chooses herself, is not the villain in this story. She's the hero. And the life you're living right now, the one where everyone else comes first, is not noble. It's not selfless. It's not loving. It's self-destruction dressed up as virtue. And it's time to call it what it is. This is the unnamed suffering. This is self-abandonment. And it's killing you slowly. One yes at a time. One silence at a time. One betrayal of yourself at a time. You didn't choose this pattern. You didn't wake up one day and decide to abandon yourself. This was taught to you, carefully, systematically, by people who loved you and people who didn't, by families and schools and churches and cultures, by every system that benefited from your compliance and called it virtue. You learned this the way you learned to walk and talk and tie your shoes, through repetition, through reward and punishment, through watching what happened when you took up space and what happened when you disappeared. Let's go back to the beginning, to the first time you learned that your needs were too much. You were young. maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years old. You needed something. Attention, comfort, help. And the response you got taught you that needing was dangerous. Maybe your parent was stressed and snapped at you. Maybe they were too busy and ignored you. Maybe they told you to stop being so needy, to be a big girl, to handle it yourself. You were a child. You needed care. But instead of receiving it, you received a message. Your needs are a burden. Your emotions are an inconvenience. Your existence requires too much. And so you learned. You learned to be quiet, to be good, to not ask for things. You learned that love was conditional, that approval came when you performed correctly, when you got good grades, when you cleaned your room without being asked, when you didn't cry, when you didn't complain, when you made yourself small enough that taking care of you was easy. You learned that being good meant being invisible, that the less space you took up, the less trouble you caused, the more love you would receive. This is where it starts, in childhood, in the developing brain that is trying desperately to figure out how to stay safe. And safety, for a child, means staying connected to caregivers. Because a child who is rejected by their caregivers will not survive. This is not metaphorical. This is biological fact. Your young brain knew this. And so it did what any intelligent system does when faced with threat. It adapted. It learned the rules. It figured out how to be the kind of person who wouldn't be abandoned. The neuroscience here is critical. When you're young, your brain is building the neural pathways that will shape how you relate to yourself and others for the rest of your life. Every interaction with your caregivers is teaching your developing nervous system what to expect from relationships. If your caregivers were consistently available, attuned, and responsive, your brain learned that the world is safe, that your needs matter, that you can ask for help and receive it, that you are worthy of love simply because you exist. But if your caregivers were inconsistent, dismissive, overwhelmed, or emotionally unavailable, your brain learned something very different. It learned that safety requires performance, that love must be earned, that expressing needs leads to rejection, that the way to stay connected is to become whatever other people need you to be. This is an attachment wound, and it lives in your nervous system, not in your conscious memory, not in your logical mind, in the deep, pre-verbal parts of your brain that developed before you had words for what was happening. This is why you can't just think your way out of people-pleasing, because the pattern isn't held in your thinking brain. It's held in your survival brain, the part that learned, before you could even speak, that invisibility equals safety, that disappearing keeps you alive, that your authentic self is too much, too loud, too needy, too demanding. So you buried her. You locked her away. You built an acceptable version of yourself on top of her, and you called this maturity. You called this being responsible. You called this growing up, but it wasn't growth. It was survival. And there's a difference. Your family taught you the specifics of how to disappear. Maybe you were the eldest child, the responsible one, the one who learned to parent your siblings because your parents were overwhelmed or absent or struggling. You learned that your role was to make things easier, to not add to the burden, to help, not need, help. You became competent, self-sufficient, the one everyone could count on. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that you were also a child who deserved care. Or maybe you were the sensitive one, the one whose emotions were too big for your family to handle. You cried too much. You felt too much. You needed too much reassurance. And you learned that your sensitivity was a flaw, that your emotions made other people uncomfortable. So you learned to hide them, to minimize them, to apologize for feeling anything at all. You became the easy child, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who stuffed every feeling into a box and smiled on the outside while drowning on the inside. Or maybe you were the peacekeeper, the one who mediated your parents' fights, who managed everyone's emotions, who learned that your value came from keeping the family together. You became hyper-vigilant to other people's moods. You could read a room before you entered it. You could sense tension in the air and immediately shift yourself to diffuse it. This felt like a superpower, but it was actually a trauma response. You were a child managing adult emotions because the adults couldn't manage them themselves, and you learned that your safety depended on keeping everyone else calm. These patterns aren't the same for everyone, but they all lead to the same place: self-abandonment. Because when a child learns that their authentic self is not acceptable, they split. They create a false self, a performed self, a self designed to meet other people's needs, and they hide the true self away. So far away that eventually they forget she exists at all. Culture reinforced what your family began. If you're a woman, you received message after message that your purpose is to serve, to nurture, to sacrifice, that good women are selfless, that mother is a synonym for martyr, that femininity means putting everyone else first. You watched your mother do it, your grandmother, your aunts. You saw them give and give and give until there was nothing left, and you were told this was beautiful. This was what love looked like. This was your destiny. If you're a caregiver, by profession or by circumstance, you learned that your worth comes from how much you can give, how much you can tolerate, how much you can carry. You learned that having needs yourself makes you bad at your job, that setting boundaries means you don't care enough, that exhaustion is just part of the role, that complaining is weakness, that burning out is a moral failing rather than a predictable result of giving more than you have. If you were raised in religious environments, you may have learned that self-denial is holy, that suffering is noble, that your desires are sinful and your needs are selfish, that the path to goodness is paved with sacrifice. You learned to distrust yourself, to see your own wants as corrupted, to believe that choosing yourself is choosing sin. And so you learned to choose everyone else, and you called it righteousness. The culture you grew up in didn't just suggest these patterns, it demanded them. It built entire systems around them. It created economic structures that rely on women's unpaid labor, social structures that punish boundary setting, religious structures that glorify suffering, educational structures that reward compliance, professional structures that exploit dedication. And all of these systems taught you the same lesson your family taught you. Your value comes from what you provide to others, not from who you are, from what you do, how much you give, how little you need. And here's what makes this so insidious. These patterns worked. They kept you safe. When you were young and powerless and dependent, disappearing was the right strategy. Making yourself easy was intelligent. Reading the room and adjusting yourself accordingly was survival. People-pleasing wasn't a flaw, it was brilliance. It was your young brain figuring out how to stay connected to the people you needed to survive. You should be proud of that child. She was resourceful. She was adaptive. She did what she had to do. But that child is not in danger anymore. You are not 4 years old and dependent on caregivers who might abandon you. You are not powerless. You are not voiceless. You have options now that you didn't have then. You have resources. You have autonomy. You have the ability to leave situations that harm you, to set boundaries with people who cross them, to choose yourself without it meaning death. But your nervous system doesn't know this. Because the patterns were set so early, before your conscious memory, they feel like truth. They feel like who you are. Your body still responds as if your survival depends on pleasing others. As if saying no will lead to abandonment. As if taking up space will lead to rejection. Your trauma responses, fawning, people-pleasing, hypervigilance, are still running the show. Still trying to keep you safe from dangers that no longer exist. Fawning is a trauma response. It's not the same as being nice. It's not the same as being kind or generous or compassionate. Fawning is when you abandon yourself to appease someone else. When you smile through disrespect. When you agree with things you don't believe. When you make yourself small to make someone else comfortable. When you prioritize someone else's feelings over your own safety. This is not kindness. This is survival mode. This is your nervous system detecting threat and responding the way it learned to respond when you were too young to fight or flee. People-pleasing is not a personality trait. It's a survival mechanism. It's what happens when a child learns that their authentic self is not acceptable, that love is conditional, that approval must be earned, that safety requires performance. You are not people-pleasing because you are nice. You are people-pleasing because your nervous system learned that this is how you stay alive, how you stay connected, how you avoid rejection and abandonment. Hypervigilance is not being considerate. It's not being empathetic or intuitive. Hypervigilance is when you are constantly scanning for threat, reading faces, analyzing tone, predicting needs, managing emotions, not because you want to, but because you have to. Because your body believes that missing a cue could be dangerous, that failing to adjust yourself quickly enough could lead to harm. This is exhausting. This is why you're tired all the time. Because you're running a threat detection system 24 hours a day, even in situations that are not actually dangerous. These are not character flaws. These are adaptations. Brilliant, life-saving adaptations that your young brain developed to keep you safe. And they worked. You survived. You made it here, to this moment, where you're finally ready to see these patterns for what they are, not permanent features of your personality, not evidence of your weakness, but learned responses to environments that were not safe enough for your authentic self. This is where shame transforms into compassion, because once you understand that you didn't choose this, that this was done to you, and then reinforced by every system you grew up in, you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop seeing your people-pleasing as a moral failing. You can stop hating yourself for not being stronger. You can look at that young version of yourself, the one who learned to disappear and feel something other than disgust. You can feel tenderness. You can feel respect. You can feel grief for what she had to do to survive. She was doing her best. She was brilliant, actually. She figured out the rules of her environment and played by them perfectly. She kept you alive. She got you here. And now it's time to thank her for her service and gently, lovingly, tell her that the danger has passed, that the adaptation that saved you then is hurting you now, that the prison that kept you safe has become the prison that keeps you small, that it's time for a different strategy. Not because the old one was wrong, but because you're not in that situation anymore. You have grown. Your circumstances have changed, and the patterns that once protected you are now destroying you. It's time to learn something new, not from a place of shame, but from a place of understanding. You were conditioned to disappear. Now you get to learn how to come back. Now that you understand where this pattern came from, you need to understand where you're going, because transformation is not a single moment. It's not a switch that flips from people-pleaser to sovereign. It's a journey, a progression through distinct stages, each with its own challenges, its own revelations, its own kind of pain, and its own kind of freedom. And knowing where you are on this map makes all the difference, because when you can name the stage you're in, you can stop judging yourself for not being further along. You can recognize that discomfort is not failure. It's progress. It's proof that you're moving, that you're changing, that you're becoming someone new. There are 5 stages in this journey, 5 distinct phases of reclaiming yourself, and most people cycle through them multiple times in different areas of their lives before the transformation becomes permanent. So as you listen to these stages, be honest with yourself about where you are, not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, where you actually are, right now, in this moment. Because that's the only place transformation can begin. Stage 1 is the sleepwalker. This is where most people spend most of their lives, moving through the world on autopilot, saying yes without thinking, following patterns without questioning them. You wake up, you go through the motions, you do what's expected, you perform your roles: daughter, sister, friend, employee, partner. You show up, you smile, you comply. And if someone asks you what you want, what you need, what you actually desire, you have no answer, because you've never stopped long enough to ask yourself that question. In this stage, you feel vaguely unhappy. Something is off. Something is missing. But you can't name it. You can't point to it. You tell yourself everyone feels this way, that this is just adulthood, just responsibility, just life. You have everything you're supposed to want: a job, relationships, a routine. So why do you feel so empty? Why do you wake up with dread? Why does every social obligation feel like a burden? Why are you so tired all the time? You don't have answers. You just have this low-grade dissatisfaction that you've learned to ignore, to normalize, to accept as permanent. Physically, you're numb. You've disconnected from your body because your body has been trying to tell you something you're not ready to hear. You don't notice the tension, the shallow breathing, the way you hold stress in your jaw and shoulders. You override hunger. You push through exhaustion. You medicate discomfort. Your body is screaming, and you've turned down the volume so low you can barely hear it anymore. Relationally, everything looks fine from the outside. You have friends. You have family. You have connections. But none of them feel real. None of them feel deep. Because no one actually knows you. How could they? You don't even know yourself. You've been performing for so long you've forgotten there's a person underneath the performance. Your relationships are transactional, based on what you provide, what role you play, what need you fill, and you don't even realize it yet, because this is all you've ever known. Then something happens, a crisis, a betrayal, a breakdown, a moment where the performance becomes impossible to maintain, and you wake up. You move into stage 2, the awakened. This is the most disorienting stage, because suddenly you can see everything you couldn't see before. all the ways you've abandoned yourself, all the times you said yes when you meant no, all the relationships that only work because you're willing to betray yourself, all the years you've lost living someone else's life. The awareness hits you like a truck, and it's overwhelming. In this stage, you feel angry, furious actually, at everyone who took advantage of your inability to set boundaries, at the systems that conditioned you, at yourself for participating in your own diminishment. The anger is disorienting because you're not used to it. You're used to being understanding, forgiving, flexible. But now you're rage, and you don't know what to do with it. So it leaks out in strange ways: irritability, resentment, passive aggression, or it turns inward, becomes depression, self-loathing, shame. You also feel guilt, deep, suffocating guilt, because now that you see the pattern, you want to change it. You want to start saying no, setting boundaries, choosing yourself. But the moment you consider it, the guilt floods in. Who are you to prioritize your needs? What about everyone who depends on you? What about your responsibilities? What if people get hurt? What if they leave? The guilt feels like proof that wanting more is selfish, that you should be grateful for what you have, that changing means becoming someone you don't want to be. And underneath the anger and the guilt is confusion. You know something needs to change, but you don't know how. You don't know where to start. You don't have the tools yet. You just have the awareness. And awareness without action is torture. You can see the cage, but you don't know how to unlock it. So you sit in this stage, uncomfortable, angry, guilty, confused, wanting desperately to move forward, but terrified of what that will cost. Physically, you start to feel everything. The numbness lifts, and suddenly your body is shouting. The tension, the exhaustion, the stress. It's all there, louder than ever. Because you're finally paying attention. And it's almost too much to bear. Relationally, things start to crack. Because you're seeing your relationships clearly for the first time. And you are noticing patterns you never noticed before. How one-sided they are. How much you give and how little you receive. How people react when you don't perform the way they expect. And this awareness creates distance, resentment, a pulling back. But you're not ready to do anything about it yet. So you sit in the discomfort, watching, waiting, building the courage for what comes next. Stage 3 is the boundary builder. This is where you start experimenting with no, where you take the first shaky steps toward choosing yourself. You say no to something small. Maybe you decline an invitation. Maybe you don't respond to a text immediately. Maybe you speak up when someone crosses a line, and it feels terrifying. Your heart races. Your hands shake. Every part of you screams that you're doing something wrong, that you're being selfish, that people will hate you, that you're about to lose everything. And then you say it. No, I can't. That doesn't work for me. I need space. And the world doesn't end. The person might be disappointed. They might push back. They might guilt trip you. But you survive it. And something shifts. You realize that you can tolerate their discomfort, that their disappointment is not your emergency, that you have the right to make choices based on what's best for you. This realization is intoxicating and terrifying because it means everything is about to change. In this stage, you feel guilty, intensely guilty, after every boundary you set, after every no you speak. The guilt sits on your chest like a weight. You second-guess yourself constantly. You replay the conversation. You wonder if you were too harsh, too selfish, too much. You consider reaching out to apologize, to explain, to backtrack. And sometimes you do. You set a boundary and then immediately walk it back because the guilt feels unbearable. This is normal. This is part of the process. You are learning. And learning means mistakes, means trying and failing and trying again. You also experience relationship friction because the people in your life are used to your compliance. They're used to your yes. And now you're saying no, and they don't like it. Some will respect it. Some will adjust. But others will push back hard. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll try to guilt you back into your old patterns. And this hurts, because you want them to understand. You want them to support your growth. But some of them won't. Some of them benefit too much from your self-abandonment to celebrate your transformation. Physically, you feel shaky, unstable. Your nervous system is in overdrive because you're doing something that feels dangerous. You're breaking old patterns, disappointing people, going against your conditioning, and your body is responding as if you are under threat. Racing heart, sweaty palms, tension, anxiety. But there's also something else, a tiny spark of something that feels like relief, like freedom, like coming home to yourself. Relationally, you start to see who's really in your corner. Some people will adjust. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll appreciate the more authentic version of you. But others will fall away. And this is devastating and necessary, because relationships built on your self-betrayal cannot survive your self-reclamation. You learn to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing people, not because you want to hurt them, but because your peace is no longer negotiable. Stage 4 is the self-protector. This is where boundaries become consistent, where saying no doesn't require a week of preparation and a month of recovery, where you can disappoint someone without spiraling into guilt. You've learned that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your choices, that no is a complete sentence, that your needs are valid simply because they're yours. You can feel pressure without caving to it. You can sense manipulation without falling for it. You can choose yourself even when it's uncomfortable, even when people are upset, even when you're the only one who understands why. In this stage, the guilt has reduced significantly. It still appears sometimes. Old conditioning doesn't disappear overnight, but it no longer controls you. You can feel the guilt and choose yourself anyway. You've learned to distinguish between appropriate remorse when you've actually harmed someone, and programmed guilt, which is just your conditioning trying to pull you back into old patterns. You trust yourself more. You second-guess yourself less. You know what you want, and you're willing to honor that even when others disagree. You've also developed the ability to prioritize your peace over approval. This is huge, because for your entire life, approval has been your currency, your oxygen, the thing you needed to survive. But now you're learning that approval from the wrong people costs too much, that being liked by everyone means being known by no one, that you'd rather be respected than liked, rather be authentic than approved of. This shift changes everything. Physically, you feel more grounded, more solid. Your nervous system is starting to trust that you'll protect yourself, that you won't abandon yourself to keep others comfortable. The chronic tension starts to release. The exhaustion starts to lift. You sleep better. You breathe deeper. Your body is learning that it's safe to relax, that you're not in constant danger anymore. Relationally, your circle has gotten smaller but deeper. You've let go of relationships that required your self-betrayal. and what remains are connections built on truth, on reciprocity, on mutual respect. You're comfortable being misunderstood. You don't need everyone to agree with your choices. You've accepted that some people will think you're selfish, and their opinion no longer determines your worth. Stage 5 is the sovereign. This is the destination, the place where choosing yourself is automatic, where there's no internal debate, no guilt, no second guessing. You know what you want, you know what you need, and you honor it without apology. Your boundaries are firm and clear. Your no is immediate and guilt-free. Your yes is genuine and freely given. You've built a life that protects your peace, and you're no longer willing to sacrifice it for anything or anyone. In this stage, relationships are reciprocal or they're non-existent. You've learned that you'd rather be alone than depleted. That solitude is better than bad company. That you don't need to maintain connections that cost you your peace. You're selective about who gets access to you. And that selectivity is not cruelty. It's wisdom. You have deep inner peace, regardless of external chaos, because your peace is not dependent on circumstances. It's not dependent on other people's approval or understanding. It's rooted in your relationship with yourself, in your commitment to your own well-being, in your refusal to abandon yourself no matter what. You have complete trust in your own judgment. You don't need validation. You don't need permission. You don't need consensus. You check in with yourself, and you know. And that knowing is enough. This is sovereignty. This is freedom. This is what's waiting for you on the other side of this journey. And you will get here, one stage at a time, one choice at a time. One moment of choosing yourself at a time. Understanding the stages is essential, but understanding alone will not save you. You need tools, practical, immediate, repeatable tools that give you power in the moment when someone makes a demand, and your mouth is already forming the word yes before your brain has time to think. You need something that interrupts the automatic pattern, something that creates space between the request and your response. Something that gives you back your agency. This is that tool, and it will change your life if you let it. The tool has two parts, the sacred pause and the internal referendum. Together, they form a system that transforms how you make decisions. That takes you from reactive to intentional, from automatic compliance to conscious choice, from people-pleasing to self-honoring. And the beauty of this system is that it works immediately. The first time you use it, you will feel different, more grounded, more in control, more like yourself. Let's start with the sacred pause. This is simple but not easy. When someone makes a request, presents an expectation, or demands something from you, you pause. You do not respond immediately. You do not say yes reflexively. You do not launch into explanation or justification. You simply pause. You create space. You give yourself time, even if it's just 3 seconds, even if it's just one breath. That pause is sacred. It's the moment where your power lives. It's the gap between stimulus and response where your freedom exists. This sounds simple, but for someone who has spent their entire life responding instantly, automatically, compliantly, this pause feels impossible. Your conditioning tells you that pausing is rude, that making someone wait for an answer is inconsiderate, that you should know immediately whether you want to do something. But this is a lie. This is the conditioning talking. The truth is that you have every right to take time before committing yourself. Every right to consider whether something aligns with your needs before agreeing to it. Every right to consult with yourself before consulting with others. The pause does something crucial. It interrupts the automatic pattern. For your entire life, your nervous system has been trained to respond to requests with immediate compliance. Someone asks and you say yes before you've even registered what they're asking. This is a trauma response. This is fawning. This is your body trying to keep you safe by making you agreeable. The pause disrupts this. It gives your thinking brain time to come online. It allows you to access the part of yourself that knows what you actually want, instead of just reacting from the part that's trying to avoid conflict. During the pause, you drop into your body. This is critical, because your body knows the truth before your mind does. Your body knows whether something is right for you, whether it nourishes or depletes you, whether it expands or contracts you. You just have to learn to listen. Pay attention to physical sensations. Does your chest feel open or closed? Does your stomach feel light or heavy? Do your shoulders relax or tense? Does your breathing deepen or become shallow? These are not random sensations. These are your body's wisdom. Your body is giving you information. It's telling you whether this request aligns with your truth or violates it, whether saying yes will nourish you or deplete you, whether you're moving towards something you want or away from something you fear. Contraction is a no. When your body contracts, tightens, closes, that's information. That's your nervous system telling you this doesn't feel safe. This doesn't feel right. This is not aligned with what you need. Expansion is a yes. When your body opens, softens, relaxes, that's information too. That's your system telling you this feels good. This feels true. This is aligned with who you are and what you need. Most people have spent so long ignoring their body's signals that they can't feel them anymore. If this is you, start practicing. Start noticing. When you're in situations that feel good, what does your body do? When you're in situations that feel bad, what does your body do? Learn your own signals. Learn your own language. Your body has been trying to talk to you for years. It's time to start listening. The sacred pause gives you time to feel, to notice, to consult with the wisdom that lives in your body. And then, once you've paused, once you've dropped in, you move to the second part of the tool, the internal referendum. This is a set of 3 questions that create instant clarity. 3 questions that cut through confusion and give you a clear answer about whether to say yes or no. Question 1. Does this nourish or deplete me? This question is simple but profound. It forces you to be honest about the cost of your yes. Not just the time cost, not just the energy cost, the full cost. Will saying yes to this feed you or drain you? Will it add to your life or subtract from it? Will it leave you feeling energized or exhausted? Will it bring you closer to the life you want or further from it? Be ruthlessly honest, because a yes that depletes you is a no to yourself. Question 2. Am I doing this from love or from fear? This question reveals your true motivation. Are you saying yes because you genuinely want to, because it aligns with your values, because it brings you joy? Or are you saying yes because you're afraid? Afraid of disappointing someone, afraid of conflict, afraid of being seen as selfish, afraid of losing the relationship, afraid of being alone. Fear-based yeses are not real yeses. They're survival responses, and they always lead to resentment. Love-based yeses feel different. They feel clean. They feel true. They feel like a gift you're giving freely, not a ransom you're paying to avoid punishment. Question 3. Will I resent this decision tomorrow? This is the future test. It forces you to think beyond the immediate moment, beyond the pressure you feel right now, beyond the guilt of saying no. If you say yes to this, how will you feel tomorrow? Next week? Next month? Will you be glad you did it? Or will you wake up angry at yourself for betraying yourself again? Will you spend the time leading up to it dreading it? Will you spend the time after it recovering from it? Resentment is a clear signal. If you know you'll resent it, the answer is no. Even if saying no is uncomfortable, even if the other person is disappointed, even if it causes conflict, because resentment is poison, and it's not worth it. These 3 questions give you structure. They give you a framework for making decisions that honor yourself. They take the ambiguity out of the process. You don't have to wonder whether you should say yes or no. You just have to answer the questions honestly. And the answer will be clear. Let's walk through some scenarios so you can see how this works in practice. Your friend calls. She needs help moving. Again. This is the 3rd time this year. She always asks you because she knows you'll say yes. You feel your stomach drop when you see her name on the screen. You already know what she wants. Old pattern? You answer. You say yes immediately. You rationalize it. She needs help. You're a good friend. What's a few hours? New pattern? You pause. You feel into your body. Your chest is tight. Your shoulders are tense. You ask the questions. Does this nourish or deplete me? Depletes. Am I doing this from love or from fear? Fear. Fear she'll be upset. Fear she'll stop calling. Fear she'll think you're selfish. Will I resent this decision tomorrow? Yes. Absolutely. The answer is clear. You text back. I can't this time. No explanation. No apology. No offer to help in a different way. Just a clear boundary. And yes, she's upset. And yes, it's uncomfortable. But you chose yourself. And that matters more. Your mother calls. She's planning another family gathering. She expects you to be there. She always expects you to be there. You just went to one last month. You're exhausted. You have plans. But she's already talking about dates, about what to bring, about how excited everyone will be to see you. Old pattern? You cancel your plans. You go. You spend the entire time exhausted and resentful, counting to the minutes until you can leave. New pattern? You pause. You notice your jaw clenching, your breathing getting shallow. You ask the questions. Does this nourish or deplete me? Depletes. Am I doing this from love or from fear? Fear. Fear of her disappointment. Fear of being labeled the difficult child. Fear of family judgment. Will I resent this decision tomorrow? Absolutely. The answer is clear. You tell her you can't make it. She's hurt. She tries to guilt you. She says you never come anymore. She says family should be a priority. And you hold your boundary. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't explain. You simply repeat. I can't make it this time, and you let her be upset. Because her emotions are not your responsibility. Your boss asks you to stay late, to take on another project, to work through the weekend. You're already drowning. You're already working late every night. Your health is suffering. Your relationships are suffering. But he's standing there, waiting for an answer. And he expects you to say yes. Everyone always expects you to say yes. Old pattern? You say yes. You tell yourself it's temporary. That once this project is done, things will slow down. But they never do. There's always another project, another deadline, another emergency. New pattern? You pause. You feel the tightness in your chest, the exhaustion in your bones. You ask the questions. Does this nourish or deplete me? Depletes. Am I doing this from love or from fear? Fear. Fear of losing your job. Fear of being seen as uncommitted. Fear of professional consequences. Will I resent this decision tomorrow? Yes. And every day after, until the project is done. The answer is clear. You tell him you can't take on anything else right now, that you're at capacity, that you need to prioritize the projects you're already committed to. And maybe he's unhappy. Maybe there are consequences. But you drew a line. You protected yourself. And that's worth more than his approval. Your partner wants more. More time, more attention, more emotional labor. More than you have to give right now. And you love them. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want them to feel neglected. But you're empty. You have nothing left. Old pattern? You push through. You ignore your own depletion. You give from an empty tank and wonder why you're resentful. Why you're pulling away. Why intimacy feels like another demand instead of a gift. New pattern? You pause. You notice the heaviness, the sense of being asked for more than you have. You ask the questions. Does this nourish or deplete me? Right now, in this moment, depletes. Am I doing this from love or from fear? Fear. Fear they'll leave if you don't meet their needs. Fear you're not enough. Fear of being alone. Will I resent this decision tomorrow? Yes. The answer is clear. You tell them the truth. I love you. And I don't have the capacity for this right now. I need space to refill. And you let them be disappointed. You trust that if the relationship is right, it will survive your honesty. And if it's not, it will end. And either way, you chose yourself. This is how it works. This is how the sacred pause and the internal referendum transform your life. Not all at once. Not in every situation immediately. But one decision at a time. One boundary at a time. One moment of choosing yourself at a time. And each time you use this tool, you get stronger. The pause becomes easier. The body awareness becomes clearer. The questions become automatic, and the guilt becomes quieter. Until one day you realize that choosing yourself is no longer a struggle. It's just who you are. This is your tool. Use it. Trust it. Watch it change everything. The sacred pause and the internal referendum will get you started. They will give you the foundation, the ability to stop, to check in with yourself, to make conscious choices instead of automatic ones. But transformation requires more than one tool. It requires a system, a comprehensive approach that addresses every angle of self-abandonment and builds new patterns in its place. These are the advanced tools, the practices that deepen your mastery, that take you from basic competence to true sovereignty. You don't need to implement them all at once. That would be overwhelming. That would set you up for failure. Instead, choose one. Master it. Then add another. Layer them slowly. Build your system over time. Give yourself grace for imperfection. Because this is a practice, not a performance, and every small step is progress. The first advanced tool is the energy audit. This is simple but revelatory. Every single day, you track who and what drains you versus who and what fuels you. You pay attention. You notice patterns. You become ruthlessly honest about the cost of your commitments, your relationships, your activities, your obligations. You stop pretending that things are fine when they're not. You stop telling yourself that you should enjoy things you don't enjoy. You stop forcing yourself to maintain relationships that deplete you just because you've known someone for a long time or because ending it would be uncomfortable. Here's how it works. At the end of each day, you sit down with a journal or a notes app on your phone. You write 2 lists. On one side, you write everything that gave you energy today, everything that made you feel alive, expansive, light, nourished yourself. On the other side, you write everything that drained you, everything that made you feel heavy, contracted, exhausted, resentful, like you were performing instead of being. Be specific. Don't just write work. Write which parts of work, which meetings, which tasks, which interactions. Don't just write people's names. Write which conversations, which dynamics, which expectations. Do this for 30 days. Just observe. Just notice. Don't change anything yet. Don't judge yourself for what you discover. Just collect data. Because you can't redesign your life if you don't know what's actually happening in it. And most people are so disconnected from their own experience that they have no idea what's draining them. They just know they're exhausted. The energy audit gives you clarity. It shows you where your energy is going, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. After 30 days, patterns will emerge. You'll notice that certain people always show up on the drain list, that certain activities consistently deplete you, that certain obligations leave you feeling resentful every single time. And here's where the power comes in. Now you have information. Now you can make strategic choices. You can start curating your relationships, reducing time with people who drain you, increasing time with people who fuel you. You can redesign your schedule. Say no to activities that deplete you. Say yes to things that nourish you. This is not selfish. This is strategic. This is taking responsibility for your own energy instead of giving it away unconsciously. The second tool is the guilt translator. Because even when you start setting boundaries, even when you start choosing yourself, the guilt will still show up. It will whisper that you're being selfish, that you're hurting people, that you're not good enough. And if you don't have a way to handle this guilt, it will pull you back into old patterns. It will make you backtrack on your boundaries. It will convince you that choosing yourself is wrong. The guilt translator helps you distinguish between two types of guilt: appropriate remorse and programmed people-pleasing guilt. Appropriate remorse is what you feel when you've actually harmed someone, when you've been cruel or dishonest or violated someone's trust, when you've broken your own values. This guilt is useful. It's information. It tells you that you need to make amends, to apologize, to change your behavior. This guilt should be listened to. But programmed people-pleasing guilt is different. This is the guilt you feel when you set a boundary, when you say no, when you disappoint someone, when you prioritize your needs, when you choose yourself over someone else's comfort. This guilt is not about harm. It's about conditioning. It's your nervous system reacting to breaking old patterns. It's the internalized voice of everyone who taught you that your worth comes from sacrifice. This guilt should be questioned. Here's how to use the guilt translator. When guilt shows up, pause. Ask yourself, did I actually harm someone? Did I violate my own values? Did I act with cruelty or dishonesty? If the answer is yes, that's appropriate remorse. Listen to it. Make it right. But if the answer is no, if all you did was set a boundary, say no, or prioritize yourself, then that's programmed guilt. And you talk back to it. You say, this is conditioning, not truth. You say, I have the right to choose myself. You say, their disappointment is not my emergency. You translate the guilt from a moral compass into what it actually is. Old programming, trying to keep you small. The third tool is the no-script library. One of the reasons saying no feels so hard is because you don't know what to say. You panic. You stumble over your words. You over-explain. You apologize excessively. You leave openings for negotiation. And the other person senses your uncertainty, and pushes back. The no-script library eliminates this problem. You pre-craft responses for common boundary violations. You practice them until they feel natural, and when the moment comes, you have language ready. You don't have to think. You just respond. Here are some scripts to start with. When someone asks you to do something you don't want to do, I can't commit to that. When they push for a reason, it just doesn't work for me right now. When they push harder, I understand you're disappointed, but my answer is no. When someone tries to guilt you, I hear that you're upset, and my boundary still stands. When someone demands your time, I'm not available for that. When they ask when you will be available, I'll let you know if that changes. When someone crosses a line, that doesn't work for me. When they minimize your boundary, I need you to respect what I just said. When someone tries to negotiate, this isn't negotiable. Notice what these scripts have in common. They're short, they're clear, they don't apologize, they don't over-explain, they don't leave room for debate. They state the boundary and stop. Practice them. Say them out loud. Write them down. Put them in your phone. Memorize them, so that when pressure comes, when someone pushes, when your nervous system goes into panic mode, you have words, you have structure, you have a way to hold your ground without collapsing into people-pleasing. The fourth tool is the relationship recession. This one is hard, because it requires you to acknowledge something you've been avoiding. Not all relationships are meant to last forever. Not all relationships deserve the same level of investment. Not all relationships can survive your transformation. And some relationships are actively harmful. They drain you. They deplete you. They only work because you're willing to abandon yourself, and you need to let them go, or at least significantly reduce the time and energy you give them. The relationship recession is intentional distance. It's pulling back from people who consistently violate your boundaries, who take more than they give, who only show up when they need something, who guilt-trip you when you say no, who don't respect your growth. You stop initiating contact. You stop being available whenever they call. You stop showing up to every event. You stop explaining yourself. You just quietly, consistently create space. And you watch what happens. Some people will notice. Some will reach out. Some will adjust their behavior. Some will respect your boundaries, and the relationship will deepen. But others won't. Others will double down on guilt. Others will get angry. Others will disappear entirely. And this tells you everything you need to know. The relationships that survive your boundaries are the ones worth keeping. The ones that don't were never built on truth in the first place. They were built on your self-betrayal. And as painful as it is to lose them, you're not actually losing something real. You're losing a performance, a transaction, a dynamic that required you to disappear. During the relationship recession, you increase solo restoration time. You fill the space that used to be occupied by draining relationships with solitude, with rest, with activities that nourish you, with silence, with stillness, with reconnecting to yourself. This is not loneliness. This is reclamation. This is learning to be with yourself without distraction, without performing, without needing external validation to know you're okay. This time alone is sacred. It's where you rebuild your relationship with yourself, where you remember who you are when no one is watching, where you practice being enough just as you are. The fifth tool is the mirror practice. This addresses the root of self-abandonment, the belief that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn love through performance, that you're only valuable when you're useful, This belief lives deep. It was planted early, and it requires consistent, deliberate rewiring. The mirror practice is how you do that. Every single day, you stand in front of a mirror and you speak truth to yourself. Not empty platitudes, not things you don't believe, but statements that challenge your conditioning. Statements that build new neural pathways. Statements that shift your identity from someone who needs external validation to someone who has internal knowing. You look yourself in the eyes and you say things like, "My worth is not determined by what I provide to others. I am allowed to take up space. I do not need to earn the right to exist. My needs are valid. My boundaries are necessary. My peace is not negotiable. I am enough exactly as I am. I do not owe anyone an explanation for my choices. I am allowed to change my mind. I am allowed to grow. I am allowed to choose myself." At first, this will feel ridiculous. You won't believe the words. They'll feel fake, performative. But say them anyway. Because your brain doesn't know the difference between a belief you already have and a belief you're practicing. Every time you speak these statements, you're creating new neural pathways. You're teaching your brain a different story. You're rewiring the conditioning that taught you to abandon yourself. Do this for 60 days, every single morning, and watch what shifts. Watch how your tolerance for disrespect decreases, how your boundaries become easier to hold, how your need for external validation diminishes, how your confidence in your own judgment increases. These 5 tools work together. The energy audit shows you where you're losing yourself. The guilt translator helps you hold boundaries despite conditioning. The no-script library gives you language when pressure comes. The relationship recession creates space for relationships that actually nourish you. The mirror practice rebuilds your sense of self-worth from the inside out. Together, they form a comprehensive system, a way of living that prioritizes your peace, that protects your energy, that honors your truth, that makes choosing yourself not a struggle, but a practice, not a performance, but a way of being. You don't need to be perfect at any of these. You don't need to implement them all at once. You just need to start. Pick one. Try it. See what changes. Add another when you're ready. Build your system slowly. Give yourself permission to mess up, to backslide, to forget, to struggle. Because transformation is not linear. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But every time you use one of these tools, you're choosing yourself. You're building new patterns. You're becoming someone new. And that's enough. That's everything. Keep going. Tools are essential, but tools alone are not enough. Because no matter how skilled you become at setting boundaries in the moment, if your entire life is structured to deplete you, you will eventually collapse. You will backslide. You will return to old patterns, not because you're weak, but because your environment is working against you. Because the systems you live within are designed to extract everything you have. Because you're trying to build something new while standing on a foundation that was built for your self-abandonment. This is why transformation requires more than mindset shifts, more than individual tools. It requires structural change. It requires redesigning your life from the ground up, building foundations that protect your peace instead of undermining it, creating systems that make choosing yourself the easy choice, the natural choice, the only choice that makes sense. This is the shift from reactive to proactive, from setting boundaries when violations happen to building a life where violations are rare because your entire existence is architected around your peace. This is not about controlling everything. Life will always bring unexpected challenges, but it is about controlling what you can control, about making strategic choices that reduce the amount of energy you have to spend defending yourself, about creating an environment that supports your sovereignty instead of constantly testing it. Let's start with environmental curation. Your environment is not neutral. Every space you occupy, every object you see, every sound you hear, every image you consume is either signaling safety or signaling threat to your nervous system. And if your environment is chaotic, cluttered, overstimulating, or filled with reminders of obligations and expectations, your nervous system will stay in survival mode. It will stay activated. It will burn through your energy, just maintaining baseline functioning. You cannot rest in an environment that feels unsafe. You cannot choose yourself in a space that constantly reminds you of everyone else's needs. Start with your physical space. Look around. What do you see? Is your home filled with clutter that needs to be dealt with? Projects you haven't finished? Gifts from people you don't even like that you keep out of guilt? Furniture arranged to accommodate guests you rarely have? Decorations chosen to impress visitors rather than nourish you? Every single thing in your space should either serve you or bring you joy. If it doesn't, it's costing you energy. It's taking up mental bandwidth. It's creating subconscious stress. Get rid of it. Donate it. Throw it away. Stop keeping things out of obligation. Your space should be a sanctuary, a place that signals to your nervous system that you are safe, that you are home, that you can finally rest. Create specific sanctuary spaces within your home. A corner, a room, a chair by the window. Somewhere that is just yours, where you don't do work, where you don't scroll your phone, where you don't entertain guests or manage household tasks. Just a space for being, for stillness, for reconnecting with yourself. Make it comfortable, make it beautiful, make it sacred, and protect it. Don't let it become a dumping ground for laundry or mail or other people's stuff. This space is yours, and it matters. Your digital environment needs the same attention, because your phone is not just a tool, it's a portal through which the entire world can access you, through which demands can reach you at any moment, through which you can compare yourself to everyone else's highlight reel, through which you can seek validation and find emptiness, through which you can lose hours of your life scrolling through content that leaves you feeling worse than you did before. This has to stop. You need boundaries around your digital consumption. Delete apps that drain you. Unfollow accounts that trigger comparison. Turn off notifications. Establish phone-free hours. Stop checking email after a certain time. Stop bringing your phone into your bedroom. Stop using it as the first and last thing you interact with each day. Your attention is your most valuable resource, and you're giving it away for free to algorithms designed to keep you addicted. Take it back. Protect it. Use it intentionally. Your social calendar needs curation too. Look at how you spend your time. How many of your commitments are things you actually want to do versus things you feel obligated to do? How many events leave you energized versus depleted? How much time do you spend alone versus with others? How much of your schedule is chosen by you versus dictated by other people's expectations? Your calendar should reflect your priorities, your values, your energy. If it doesn't, you're living someone else's life. Start saying no to events that deplete you. Start blocking off time for rest, for solitude, for activities that nourish you. Stop treating your calendar like a democracy where everyone gets a vote. It's not. It's yours, and you get to fill it however you want. The second foundation is routine sovereignty. Routines might sound boring, restrictive, but they're actually liberating, because routines eliminate decision fatigue. They create predictable pockets of peace throughout your day. They anchor your identity in self-priority instead of other people's needs. When your morning and evening are structured around practices that nourish you, you start and end each day connected to yourself. And that connection becomes the foundation from which everything else flows. Your morning routine should be non-negotiable. This is the first hour of your day. Before you check your phone, before you respond to anyone, before you enter the demands of the world. This hour is yours, and you use it to ground yourself, to set intentions, to remind yourself who you are and what matters. Maybe you meditate. Maybe you journal. Maybe you move your body. Maybe you sit in silence with coffee. Maybe you read something that inspires you. The specific activities matter less than the commitment. The commitment to putting yourself first, to starting your day from a place of fullness instead of immediately giving yourself away. Your evening routine is just as important. This is how you close the loop, how you process the day, how you release what doesn't serve you, how you prepare your nervous system for rest. Maybe you reflect on what you're grateful for. Maybe you do the energy audit. Maybe you review your boundaries. Maybe you practice the mirror affirmations. Maybe you take a bath. Maybe you read fiction. Maybe you just sit in stillness. Again, the specific practices matter less than the consistency. The commitment to ending your day by reconnecting with yourself, by honoring your needs, by creating closure. These routines become anchors. When life gets chaotic, when stress increases, when you're tempted to backslide into old patterns, your routines keep you tethered. They remind you who you're becoming. They create structure when everything else feels uncertain. They protect your peace when external forces try to steal it. The third foundation is relationship standards. You cannot build a life that protects your peace if you're surrounded by people who violate it. This means you need non-negotiable criteria for who gets access to you, for who earns the right to be in your inner circle, for who deserves your time, your energy, your emotional labor. And you need to audit your existing relationships through this lens, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of honest assessment, because not everyone who's been in your life deserves to stay there. Here are some standards to consider. Do they respect your boundaries without you having to explain or defend them? Do they take responsibility for their own emotions instead of making you responsible? Do they show up consistently or only when they need something? Do they celebrate your growth or feel threatened by it? Do conversations feel reciprocal or one-sided? Do you feel energized or depleted after spending time with them? Do they accept you as you are or constantly try to change you? Can you be honest with them or do you perform? Do they honor your time or assume you're always available? These questions reveal the quality of your connections, and quality matters more than quantity, more than history, more than familiarity. If someone consistently fails these standards, you have choices. You can have a direct conversation and give them the opportunity to adjust. You can reduce the time you spend with them. You can change the nature of the relationship. Or you can end it. Not all relationships are meant to last forever. And holding on to connections that deplete you because of history or obligation or fear of being alone is self-abandonment. It's choosing their comfort over your peace. And that's not sustainable. The fourth foundation is financial boundaries. Money and self-abandonment are deeply connected. Because when you're financially dependent on someone, saying no becomes dangerous. When you're underpaid and overworked, setting boundaries at work feels impossible. When you're trapped in debt, you can't leave situations that harm you. Financial insecurity makes self-abandonment feel like survival, and in some cases, it is. This is why financial boundaries are essential. Not just nice to have, essential. Start by understanding your financial reality. What do you actually need to survive? What are you spending money on out of obligation or guilt? Are you supporting people who should be supporting themselves? Are you saying yes to expensive social activities you can't afford because you're afraid of missing out? Are you staying in a job that destroys your health because you think you have no other options? Get clear on the numbers. Get clear on what's actually true versus what fear is telling you. Then start building financial independence, even if it's slow, even if it's small. Open a separate account that only you control. Start saving something, anything, every month. Reduce expenses where you can. Increase income where possible. Learn about money. Stop avoiding it. Stop pretending it doesn't matter. Because it does matter. Financial freedom is the foundation of every other kind of freedom. When you have enough money to say no, you have power. When you don't, you're vulnerable. And people who benefit from your self-abandonment know this. They use it. Build your financial security. Protect it. Let it support your sovereignty. The fifth foundation is communication architecture. You need a personal manifesto, a clear, written statement of your values, your needs, your boundaries. Not for other people, for you. So that when pressure comes, when someone pushes, when you're tempted to backslide, you have something to return to, something that reminds you what you stand for, what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not, what matters to you and what doesn't. This manifesto becomes your North Star, your reference point, your anchor. Write it down. What are your core values? What do you need to feel safe, nourished, at peace? What are your non-negotiables in relationships, in work, in life? What behaviors will you no longer tolerate? What patterns are you committed to breaking? What kind of life are you building? Be specific. Be honest. And once it's written, return to it regularly. Update it as you grow. Let it guide your choices. Let it inform your communication, so that you're not constantly negotiating from scratch. You already know what you stand for. You just have to remember it. These 5 foundations work together. Environmental curation reduces external triggers. Routine sovereignty anchors your identity. Relationship standards protect your energy. Financial boundaries create real freedom. Communication architecture provides clarity. Together, they form the infrastructure of a life that protects your peace. A life designed around your needs instead of everyone else's. A life where choosing yourself is not a constant battle, but a natural result of how everything is structured. This takes time. This takes intention. This takes consistency. But it's worth it. Because sustainable transformation doesn't come from willpower. It comes from systems, from foundations that make the right choice the easy choice, from environments that support who you're becoming instead of pulling you back to who you were. Build these foundations, protect them, let them carry you when willpower fails. Let them hold you when stress increases. Let them remind you that your peace is not negotiable. that your life is yours, that you deserve to live in a way that honors who you actually are. You've learned the tools, built the foundations, started the practice of choosing yourself. And maybe you believe in it because you've felt the difference, because your life is starting to change, because the relief is real. But maybe there's still a voice inside that whispers, "This is selfish," that questions whether prioritizing your peace is actually justified, that wonders if you're just being difficult, demanding, too much. This voice is your conditioning speaking, and it needs more than personal experience to quiet it. It needs proof. It needs science. It needs to understand that choosing yourself is not a preference or a personality trait or a luxury. It's biology. It's neuroscience. It's how your body and brain are designed to function. And when you abandon yourself, you're not just being selfless. You're violating fundamental laws of human physiology. You're creating damage that shows up in measurable, documentable, scientifically validated ways. Let's start with the nervous system, with polyvagal theory. This is critical because it explains why people-pleasing feels so automatic, so impossible to stop. Your nervous system has 3 states. The first is the ventral vagal state. This is where you feel safe, connected, calm. This is where you have access to higher-order thinking, to creativity, to genuine connection with others. This is where you can be yourself. This is the state where transformation happens, where growth is possible, where you can access the parts of your brain that make conscious, intentional choices. The second state is sympathetic activation, fight or flight. This is your body preparing for danger. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow. Blood flow moves away from your digestive system and toward your muscles. Your thinking brain goes offline. Your survival brain takes over. You're reactive. You're defensive. You're not capable of nuanced thinking or authentic connection. You're just trying to survive. The third state is dorsal vagal shutdown. This is freeze. This is collapse. This is when your body decides that fight and flight won't work, so it just shuts down. You dissociate. You go numb. You comply. You disappear. This is where chronic, people-pleasing lives. In this state of collapse where saying yes feels easier than the energy it would take to fight or flee. Here's what happens when you spend your life abandoning yourself. Your nervous system never gets to rest in ventral vagal safety. You're constantly oscillating between sympathetic activation and dorsal shutdown, between anxiety and numbness, between panic and collapse. You're living in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you don't have access to the parts of your brain that could actually solve your problems. You can't think clearly. You can't connect authentically. You can't make good decisions. You're just reacting, just surviving, just getting through. Chronic people-pleasing keeps you trapped in this cycle. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, every time you tolerate disrespect to keep the peace, your nervous system registers threat. It registers that you are not safe, that you cannot trust yourself to protect you, that the world is dangerous and you are powerless. And so it stays activated, always scanning, always vigilant, always ready for the next violation. This is not a choice you're making. This is your body trying to keep you alive in an environment it perceives as hostile. Now let's talk about what happens in your brain when you live this way. The default mode network is a set of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on the external world, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, thinking about yourself and your life. This network is responsible for your sense of self, your identity, your understanding of who you are. And here's what research shows. When you chronically abandon yourself, when you spend years prioritizing others over yourself, this network becomes distorted. Your sense of self becomes fragmented, unclear, based on other people's perceptions instead of your own knowing. You literally lose track of who you are, not metaphorically, neurologically. Contrast this with what happens when you start choosing yourself, when you set boundaries, when you honor your needs, when you prioritize your peace. Your default mode network strengthens. Your sense of self becomes clearer, more integrated, more stable, and your executive function, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, emotional regulation, gets stronger too. Because you're practicing using it. You're exercising the neural pathways that allow you to make conscious choices instead of reactive ones. You're building the infrastructure of sovereignty in your actual brain. Now let's talk about hormones, about the chemical reality of self-abandonment. When you constantly violate your own boundaries, when you live in chronic stress from saying yes when you mean no, your body produces cortisol. This is your stress hormone. And in short bursts, cortisol is helpful. It mobilizes energy. It helps you deal with threats. But chronic, elevated cortisol is poison. It disrupts your sleep. You can't fall asleep, or you can't stay asleep, or you wake up exhausted even after 8 hours. It suppresses your immune system. You get sick more often. You can't fight off infections. Your body is so busy managing stress that it can't maintain basic health. It contributes to anxiety and depression. Because your brain is marinating in stress chemicals all day, every day. It impairs memory and cognitive function. You can't focus. You can't think clearly. You forget things. You feel like you're losing your mind. This is not in your head. This is cortisol destroying your body and brain because you won't stop betraying yourself. But here's what happens when you start choosing yourself, when you set boundaries and honor them, when you prioritize your peace. Your body starts producing different chemicals. Oxytocin. This is sometimes called the bonding hormone, but it's more than that. It's the hormone of safety, of trust, of feeling connected to yourself and others in authentic ways. When you choose yourself, when you honor your truth, your body rewards you with oxytocin. It feels good, not in a superficial way, in a deep, body-level way. Your nervous system relaxes. Your heart rate variability increases. You can breathe fully. You feel calm, safe, at home in yourself. You also get endorphins, natural opioids that your body produces when you do things that are good for you. Exercise, laughter, authentic connection, and choosing yourself. When you set a boundary and hold it, when you say no and mean it, when you prioritize your needs, your brain rewards you. It creates a positive feedback loop, a biological reinforcement system that makes choosing yourself feel increasingly natural, increasingly right. This is not just mindset work. This is your body teaching you that sovereignty is your natural state, that self-abandonment is the aberration. This brings us to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, to form new connections, to rewire itself based on repeated behavior. For your entire life, you've been strengthening the neural pathways of people-pleasing. Every time you said yes when you meant no, every time you silenced yourself, every time you chose someone else over yourself, you were reinforcing those pathways, making them stronger, making them automatic, making them feel like who you are. But they're not who you are. They're just the pathways you've practiced. And here's the profound truth. You can build new pathways. Every time you choose yourself, every time you set a boundary, every time you honor your needs, you're creating new neural connections. At first, these connections are weak. Choosing yourself feels unnatural, difficult, wrong. But with repetition, with practice, with consistency, these pathways strengthen. They become more efficient, more automatic. And the old pathways, the ones that kept you trapped in people-pleasing, they start to weaken. They atrophy from lack of use. This is not metaphorical. This is measurable. This is your brain physically changing its structure based on your choices. Research shows that it takes approximately 66 days of consistent practice for a new behavior to become automatic. 66 days of choosing yourself before it starts to feel natural, before your brain stops fighting you, before the guilt quiets down. This is why the practices matter, why the tools matter, why consistency matters. You're not just changing your behavior, you're changing your brain, you're building new infrastructure. And that takes time, takes repetition, takes patience with yourself as the new pathways form. Now let's talk about relationships, because one of the biggest fears people have about choosing themselves is that it will damage their relationships, that setting boundaries will push people away, that prioritizing their own needs is selfish and will leave them alone. But attachment research shows exactly the opposite. Healthy relationships require two whole individuals, two people who are capable of taking care of themselves, who have boundaries, who know their needs and can communicate them, who don't require the other person to sacrifice themselves to maintain the connection. Relationships built on self-abandonment are not actually intimate. They're codependent, they're enmeshed, they're based on one person shrinking so the other can expand, or both people abandoning themselves and calling it love. This creates resentment, breeds dysfunction, prevents genuine connection, because you can't actually know someone who's always performing, who's always adjusting themselves to meet your needs, who never shows you who they really are, and you can't be known if you're hiding, if you're people-pleasing, if you're more committed to maintaining peace than speaking truth. When you start choosing yourself, yes, some relationships will end. But those are the relationships that required your self-betrayal to exist. They were never built on solid ground. And losing them is not loss, it's liberation. It's making space for connections that are actually real, for people who can handle your truth, who respect your boundaries, who want to know the real you, not the performed version. Attachment research confirms this. Secure attachment, the healthiest kind, is characterized by two people who maintain their individual identities while also being emotionally available to each other. Not sacrifice, not merging, not one person disappearing into the other. Two whole people choosing connection. Now let's look at the research on burnout and compassion fatigue, because there's extensive documentation of what happens to people who chronically prioritize others over themselves. Burnout is not just being tired. It's a syndrome characterized by emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. It's what happens when you give more than you have for too long. Your body and mind shut down, not because you're weak, because you're depleted, because you've violated the fundamental law of sustainability. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Compassion fatigue is similar but specific to caregiving. It's the cost of caring, the accumulation of stress from constantly attending to others' suffering while neglecting your own. Healthcare workers experience it. Therapists experience it. And so do people who make caregiving their identity in personal relationships. People who are always the helper, the fixer, the one everyone turns to. This is not sustainable. The research is clear. You will break. Not might. Will. Unless you learn to prioritize your own restoration, your own peace, your own needs. And then there's resentment, the emotion that accumulates when you give without receiving, when you sacrifice without acknowledgement, when you abandon yourself repeatedly and expect others to somehow make it worthwhile. Resentment is poison. It destroys relationships from the inside. It turns love into bitterness, connection into obligation, generosity into scorekeeping. And the research shows that resentment is almost impossible to resolve without behavior change. You can't think your way out of resentment. You can't forgive your way out of it. You have to stop doing the things that create it. You have to stop abandoning yourself. You have to start setting boundaries. You have to start choosing yourself. That's the only cure. All of this science, all of this research, all of this evidence points to the same conclusion. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's necessary. It's biological. It's how you're designed to function. Self-abandonment is the aberration. It's the violation of natural law. It's what happens when conditioning overrides instinct, when culture overrides biology, when survival mechanisms from childhood persist into adulthood where they no longer serve you. Your body knows this. Your nervous system knows this. Your brain knows this. They've been trying to tell you for years, through exhaustion, through anxiety, through physical symptoms that won't resolve, through the emptiness that no amount of external validation can fill. They've been screaming at you to stop, to choose yourself, to come home. And now you have the science to back up what your body already knows. This is not selfishness. This is survival. This is health. This is what it means to be human in a way that's sustainable. Choose yourself, not despite the science, because of it. The science validates what you're doing. The tools give you methods. The foundations create structure. But none of it matters if you can't hold your ground when life gets hard, when pressure intensifies, when people push back, when consequences feel real and immediate and terrifying. Because this is where most people break. This is where they return to old patterns. This is where they decide that choosing themselves costs too much, that the discomfort is unbearable. That maybe self-abandonment wasn't so bad after all. But this is also where transformation becomes permanent, where you prove to yourself that you can withstand pressure without collapsing, that you can hold your boundaries even when everything in you wants to fold, that you are sovereign not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Let's start with family conflict, because family is where the deepest conditioning lives, where the oldest wounds exist, where guilt is weaponized with surgical precision. Your family knows exactly what to say to make you doubt yourself. They know which buttons to push. They know how to make you feel selfish for having needs, how to make you responsible for their emotions, how to turn your boundary setting into evidence that you don't care about them. And they will use this knowledge when you start choosing yourself. They will push back, hard. Your mother calls you selfish for missing a family event. Your father tells you you've changed, and not in a good way. Your siblings say you think you're too good for them now. Your relatives gossip about how difficult you've become, how you're tearing the family apart, how you used to be so sweet, and now you're so cold. Every word is designed to make you fold, to make you apologize, to make you return to the role you've always played, the accommodating one, the easy one, the one who sacrifices herself to keep everyone comfortable. Here's what you do. You stay grounded. You remember that their discomfort is not your emergency, that their guilt trips are not your truth, that their opinion of you does not define your worth. You refuse to explain your boundaries to people who have already shown they won't respect them. Because explaining is not actually about helping them understand. It's about seeking their approval, hoping that if you just use the right words, they'll see that you're not being selfish. They'll support your growth. They'll respect your needs. But they won't. Not if their comfort depends on your compliance. So you stop explaining. You stop defending. You stop trying to make them understand. You simply hold your boundary and let them be upset. You tolerate being the difficult one. This is crucial, because they will label you. They will make you the problem, the one who's ruined everything, the one who's too sensitive, too demanding, too much. And you have to be okay with that. You have to accept that in their story, you're the villain, and you have to choose yourself anyway. Not because you don't care about them, but because you care about yourself more. Because their version of peace requires your self-destruction. And that's not a price you're willing to pay anymore. Now let's talk about relationship endings, because sometimes choosing yourself means walking away from romantic relationships, from friendships, from connections you've invested years in, from people you still love. This is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because love doesn't always mean stay. Sometimes love means recognizing that this person, as much as you care about them, is not capable of respecting your boundaries, is not willing to change their patterns, is not safe for the version of yourself you're becoming. You've tried, you've communicated, you've given them opportunities to adjust, you've been patient, you've been clear, and nothing has changed. They still cross your lines. They still take more than they give. They still expect you to abandon yourself to maintain the relationship. And you have a choice. You can keep trying, keep hoping, keep sacrificing yourself on the altar of potential. Or you can choose peace. You can walk away. You can accept that this relationship, as beautiful as parts of it were, is not sustainable, not healthy, not aligned with who you're becoming. This requires holding space for grief without returning to toxic patterns. You will miss them. You will remember the good times. You will wonder if you made the right choice. You will be tempted to reach out, to try one more time, to convince yourself that maybe you were too harsh, too demanding, too unwilling to compromise. And in those moments, you have to remember why you left. You have to trust your past self, who made this decision from a place of clarity. You have to honor your boundary even when it hurts, even when you're lonely, even when you question everything. Because going back to what hurt you is not love. It's self-abandonment, dressed up as compassion. Now let's address professional crisis, money pressure, career uncertainty, the fear that saying no will cost you opportunities you can't afford to lose. This is where financial boundaries become essential. Because when your survival feels threatened, when you're worried about paying bills or losing your job or missing opportunities, choosing yourself feels impossible. It feels like a luxury you can't afford. But here's the truth. You can't afford not to. Because sacrificing your values, your health, your peace for money always costs more than it pays. Your boss asks you to take on another project that will require nights and weekends. You're already burnt out, already working more than your contract stipulates, already sacrificing your health. But you're afraid that saying no will mark you as uncommitted, will cost you the promotion, will put you on the list for layoffs. So you say yes. You take on the work. You push through. And 6 months later, you're in the hospital. Or you've quit without another job lined up. Or you've damaged your health in ways that will take years to repair. The short-term safety you bought with your compliance has cost you your long-term well-being. Here's the alternative. You say no. You acknowledge the request and clearly state your capacity. I'm at my limit. I can't take on additional projects without dropping something else or extending timelines. You set limits despite fear. You prioritize your health over hustle. And yes, there might be consequences. You might not get the promotion. You might be seen as less dedicated than your colleagues, who are also burning out, but hiding it better. But you keep your health, your sanity, your integrity, and you model for yourself that you are more important than any job, that your well-being is not negotiable, that you will not sacrifice yourself on the altar of professional success. When money is tight, when opportunities feel scarce, you get creative instead of compliant. You look for other options. You build skills that increase your value. You save money that gives you runway to say no. You accept that the path might be harder in the short term, but sustainable in the long term, because there is no amount of money worth destroying yourself for. No opportunity worth losing yourself over. No career success that compensates for a life lived in self-betrayal. Now let's talk about personal failure, about backsliding, about the moments when you don't hold your boundary, when you say yes when you meant to say no, when you fall back into people-pleasing, when you abandon yourself after weeks or months of choosing yourself. This will happen. Not might. Will. Because growth is not linear. Because old patterns are strong. Because in moments of stress or overwhelm or exhaustion, you will default to what's familiar. And what's familiar is self-abandonment. When this happens, you do not spiral into shame. You do not decide that you're broken or weak or incapable of change. You do not use this as evidence that transformation is impossible. You extend compassion to yourself. You recognize that you're learning, that learning includes mistakes, that every backslide is information about what triggers you, what situations are harder, where you need more support or stronger boundaries. You recommit without shame. You notice what happened. You understand why it happened. And you make a different choice next time. No drama, no self-flagellation, just honest assessment and renewed commitment. This is where the mirror practice becomes essential, where you look yourself in the eyes and say, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm not perfect, and I don't need to be. I had a moment of weakness, and that's human. I'm still worthy. I'm still committed. I'm still choosing myself. And you mean it. You believe it. You let it be true, even when you've just proven that you're not there yet. Because sovereignty is not perfection. It's persistence. It's choosing yourself again after you've failed to choose yourself. It's recommitting every single day, even when yesterday you didn't. This is the work. This is the practice. This is what transformation actually looks like. Finally, let's talk about what might be the hardest scenario. Maintaining boundaries when someone you care about is suffering. When they're crying, when they're in crisis, when they're begging for your help. When saying no feels like abandoning them in their darkest moment. This is where your conditioning will scream at you, where everything you've been taught about being a good person will tell you that you have to help, that you have to sacrifice, that their need is more important than your capacity, and you have to learn to distinguish between support and self-sacrifice, between helping and enabling, between compassion and compliance. You can care about someone and still have limits. You can want to help and still protect your own peace. You can support someone without sacrificing yourself. This looks like offering what you can genuinely give without resentment. This looks like helping in ways that don't deplete you. This looks like saying, "I care about you, and I can't do what you're asking." This looks like directing them to other resources. This looks like holding space for their disappointment without changing your boundary. This looks like understanding that their crisis does not automatically become your responsibility. Sometimes people will cry. Sometimes they'll get angry. Sometimes they'll threaten consequences. They'll say, "If you really cared, you would help. If you really loved me, you would do this. If you were really my friend, you wouldn't leave me like this." And you have to recognize these for what they are. Manipulation. Not necessarily conscious, not necessarily malicious, but manipulation nonetheless. Because making someone else responsible for your emotions is manipulation. Making your well-being conditional on their compliance is manipulation. And you don't have to participate. You can hold your boundary and let them feel however they feel. Their feelings are not your responsibility. Your peace is. This is composure under fire. This is grace under pressure. This is refusing to abandon yourself even when the short-term price feels unbearable. Because the long-term price of self-abandonment is always higher. Always. You might avoid conflict today by saying yes, but you'll pay for it with resentment tomorrow. You might maintain the relationship today by shrinking yourself, but you'll lose yourself in the process. You might keep your job today by working yourself to death, but you'll destroy your health and end up unable to work at all. The strength to hold your ground in these moments doesn't come from being hard or cold or uncaring. It comes from knowing that you are worth protecting, that your peace is not selfish, that your boundaries are not negotiable, that you have already paid too high a price for other people's comfort, and you're not willing to pay it anymore. This is what sovereignty looks like when everything falls apart. Not the absence of pressure, the ability to withstand it. Not the absence of consequences, the willingness to accept them. Not the absence of doubt, the commitment to choose yourself anyway. You can do this. You will do this. One hard moment at a time, one held boundary at a time, one choice for yourself at a time. This is how you become unshakable. This is how transformation becomes permanent. This is how you prove to yourself that you will never abandon you again. You have weathered the storm. You have held your ground when everything in you wanted to collapse. You have chosen yourself in moments when it felt impossible, when guilt screamed at you, when people pushed back, when consequences felt real and immediate and terrifying, and you did it anyway. You set the boundary. You said the no. You walked away from what depleted you. You stayed committed to your peace even when the price felt unbearable. And now, on the other side of all that pressure, all that discomfort, all that fear, you are different. Not trying to be different. Not performing difference. Actually, fundamentally, permanently different. You are no longer someone who tries to choose yourself. You are someone who does. Look at where you started. You were a people-pleasing automaton, moving through life on autopilot, saying yes to everything, feeling vaguely unhappy but unable to name why. Your body was numb because you had disconnected from it to avoid feeling the cost of your compliance. Your relationships were transactional, built on what you provided rather than who you were. You woke up with dread. You moved through each day exhausted. You lay awake at night replaying conversations where you didn't defend yourself. You were a stranger in your own life, performing roles, meeting expectations, disappearing. And now look at who you are. You are grounded. You know what you need, and you honor it without apology. You know what you want, and you pursue it without seeking permission. You know what you will not tolerate, and you enforce your boundaries without explanation. You are no longer scattered across 1,000 obligations and expectations. You are centered, solid, clear. You have become sovereign, not in a performative way, not in a way that requires constant effort, in a way that has become your natural state, your default, your identity. Your mornings are different now. You wake up without dread, without that sinking feeling of obligations you don't want to meet, without immediately reaching for your phone to see what demands are waiting. You wake up and your first thought is not what does everyone else need from me. Your first thought is, what do I need today? How do I want to feel? What matters to me? You have a routine that grounds you, that connects you to yourself before you connect to the world. You move through your morning with intention, with presence, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows herself and trusts herself and will not betray herself no matter what the day brings. Your days are different too. You move through the world with boundaries intact. When someone makes a request, you pause. You check in with your body. You ask the questions. Does this nourish or deplete me? Am I doing this from love or from fear? Will I resent this decision tomorrow? And you answer honestly, and you respond accordingly. No is a complete sentence in your vocabulary now. You don't over-explain. You don't apologize for having limits. You don't twist yourself into justifications. You simply state your boundary and move forward. And yes, some people are uncomfortable with this. Some people push back. Some people call you selfish or difficult or cold, and their opinions no longer penetrate you, because you know your truth. You know your worth. You know that their discomfort with your boundaries is information about them, not about you. Your relationships are different. Some have deepened in ways you didn't know were possible, because when you stopped performing, when you started being honest, when you let people see the real you, the ones who could handle it stayed. And they stayed differently, with more respect, more reciprocity, more genuine connection, because they're not relating to a performance anymore. They're relating to a person, to you, the authentic, unfiltered, boundaried you. And it turns out that's what they wanted all along. Not your compliance, not your sacrifice, not your diminishment, just your truth, your presence, your real self. And some relationships have dissolved, fallen away, ended. Not always dramatically. Sometimes just through natural attrition. You stopped initiating. They stopped reaching out. The connection faded because it was built on your self-betrayal and couldn't survive your self-reclamation. And this outcome brings you peace too. Not the peace of denial or pretending it doesn't hurt, but the peace of knowing that relationships that require you to abandon yourself are not relationships worth keeping. That quality matters more than quantity, that you would rather be alone than depleted. That solitude is not loneliness when you genuinely like the person you're alone with. Your evenings are different now. You're not lying awake replaying the day, not obsessing over what you should have said, not drowning in guilt about boundaries you set. You process your day. You reflect. You notice what worked and what didn't. You recommit to yourself. And then you rest. Actually rest. Not the restless half-sleep of someone whose nervous system is always activated, but deep, restorative, healing sleep. Because your conscience is clear, your boundaries are intact, you haven't betrayed yourself today, and your body knows this, your nervous system knows this, so it finally feels safe enough to let go, to drop into the kind of rest that actually restores you. You no longer seek permission, not from your mother or your partner or your friends or the invisible jury of strangers whose judgment you used to carry like stones. You check in with yourself. You consult your own knowing. You trust your own judgment. And that is enough. More than enough. Because you have discovered that the only permission that ever mattered was the permission you give yourself. And you give it freely now. Permission to take up space. Permission to have needs. Permission to say no. Permission to change your mind. Permission to grow. Permission to be exactly who you are without apology or explanation. You no longer seek validation either. You used to need constant reassurance that you were doing okay, that people liked you, that you were good enough. You measured your worth by external metrics, by how many people showed up, by how quickly they responded, by how much they praised you. But that addiction has been broken, not because you don't care what people think, but because their opinions no longer determine your reality. You know who you are. You know your worth. You know that your value is intrinsic, not earned. That you are enough simply because you exist. Not because of what you do or provide or sacrifice, just because you are. Your internal authority is absolute now. Not in an arrogant way. Not in a rigid way. But in a grounded, unshakable way. When you make a decision, you don't second-guess it for days. You don't poll everyone No, you don't need consensus. You decide. You trust yourself. You move forward. And if you realize later that you made the wrong choice, you adjust. Without drama. Without shame. Without taking it as evidence that you can't trust yourself. You just make a different choice and keep moving. Because you understand now that sovereignty is not about being perfect. It's about being self-directed, about being the author of your own life instead of letting other people write your story. This is not a one-time achievement. This is not a destination you arrive at and then coast. Choosing yourself is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice. Some days it's easy. Some days it's hard. Some days you hold your boundaries without effort. Some days you have to fight for them. Some days you feel solid and clear. Some days you doubt everything. This is normal. This is the reality of being human, of living in a world that still benefits from your compliance and will constantly test your commitment to yourself. But the difference now is that even on the hard days, even when you doubt, even when pressure comes, you don't abandon yourself. You might waver, you might struggle, but you hold your ground. Because you have proven to yourself over and over that you can withstand pressure, that you can tolerate discomfort, that you can choose yourself even when it costs you. And each time you do, it gets easier. The neural pathways strengthen. The guilt quiets, the confidence grows, until one day you realize that choosing yourself is not something you have to think about anymore. It's just who you are. You will still face pressure. People will still push your boundaries. People will still expect things from you. People will still be disappointed when you say no. This will never completely stop. Because you live in relationship with others, and others have needs and wants and expectations. but their pressure no longer determines your choices. You can feel it without being controlled by it. You can acknowledge their disappointment without making it your responsibility. You can hold space for their emotions without abandoning yourself to manage them. You will still face guilt. That voice that whispers you're being selfish, that questions whether you're doing the right thing, that wonders if you're too much or not enough or just fundamentally wrong. This voice will show up, especially in moments of stress or uncertainty, or when you're making big changes. But you know how to talk back to it now. You know how to translate it. You know the difference between appropriate remorse and programmed people-pleasing. And you know that guilt is just your conditioning, trying to pull you back into old patterns. It's not truth. It's not your moral compass. It's just an echo of who you used to be, and you can acknowledge it without obeying it. You will still face criticism. People will call you selfish. They will say you've changed. They will question your priorities. They will judge your choices. They will tell you that you're doing it wrong, and their criticism will no longer shatter you, because it's not penetrating your core anymore. You have built something solid inside yourself, an internal knowing that is not dependent on external approval, a sense of self that is not fragile or conditional or constantly needing reinforcement. Their criticism is just noise, information about them, about their values and their fears and their need for you to stay small. But it's not information about you, not your truth, not your reality, just their discomfort projected onto you. And you can let them have their opinions without taking them on as yours. Here's what you need to understand, what you really need to integrate into your bones. By choosing yourself, you haven't become selfish. You have become available. Available for genuine connection instead of transactional relationships. Available for sustainable service instead of self-destructive martyrdom. Available for authentic love instead of performance-based approval seeking. Because you can only give from overflow, never from depletion. You tried giving from depletion. For years. For decades. And it created resentment. It created bitterness. It created relationships that felt like obligations. It created a life that felt like imprisonment. But now you give differently. When you choose to help someone, it's a genuine choice, not a compulsion, not a fear response, not a desperate attempt to earn worth. It's a free gift, given because you want to, because you have capacity, because it aligns with your values, and because of this, your giving creates connection instead of resentment. Your service creates fulfillment instead of depletion. Your love creates intimacy instead of distance. This is the paradox. The more you choose yourself, the more you have to give. Not less. More. Because you're giving from fullness instead of emptiness, from choice instead of obligation, from love instead of fear. Your peace is not negotiable. This is your new standard, your new baseline, your new non-negotiable truth. You will not sacrifice your peace for anyone's comfort. You will not trade your sovereignty for anyone's approval. You will not abandon yourself to avoid conflict, because you have learned, through experience, through practice, through choosing yourself over and over, in moments when it felt impossible, that nothing is worth losing yourself over. No job, no relationship, no approval, no amount of money, nothing. Your peace is the foundation of everything else, and without it, nothing else matters. Your sovereignty is not optional. This is not a phase. This is not something you're trying out. This is who you are now. You are a sovereign being. You govern yourself. You make your own choices. You live by your own values. You answer to yourself, not in an isolated way, not in an arrogant way, but in a grounded, clear, unshakable way. You are the authority in your own life, and that authority is absolute. Not because you have all the answers, but because you trust yourself to figure them out. Not because you never make mistakes, but because you trust yourself to learn from them. Not because you're perfect, but because you're yours. And that's enough. You have remembered who you are. Not who your family said you should be. Not who your culture told you to be. Not who your conditioning shaped you into. Who you actually are. Beneath all the performance. Beneath all the people-pleasing. Beneath all the self-betrayal. The person who was there all along, waiting, hoping, believing that one day you would come back for her. And you did. You came back. You chose her. You chose yourself. And nothing will make you forget again, because you have tasted sovereignty. And once you know what it feels like to live in alignment with yourself, you can never go back to the prison of other people's expectations. You are free. Finally, completely, permanently free. This is who you are now. This is who you will always be. Welcome home.